It is Thursday, May 28th. It's your boy James. And for this one, I'm about to give the wildest hot take I have on here this early because I think if it actually happens, I'm going to be so incredibly excited, over the moon, and I don't even know what's going to be going on at that point. But here it is. I think in terms of the best in terms of the cities with the best chance to have a trifecta in terms of their NFL, MLB, and NBA team winning a championship within the next decade, I think that city is Atlanta. I think Atlanta has elite level athletes from really young to really old out here, and I think they can really kind of change they can become a really big sports city within the 2020s. And here's kind of why. I'm gonna jump into it. I'm not gonna take that long to explain, and if I go too long, I apologize. The team that I think is going to win first out of the three is the Atlanta Falcons. Many people tend to sleep on the Atlanta Falcons. They're building up their offensive line. They're getting a lot stronger. No one knows how Todd Gurley's truly feeling. If Todd Gurley feels like he can play, he can play. Matt Ryan is still an elite level quarterback who won an MVP not long ago and is still putting up basically the same numbers. He's not going to drop for a bit, and he's on pace to be one of the best quarterbacks longevity wise in NFL history. Julio Jones is still an elite wide receiver who has amazing body control, and despite his injuries, looks like he still has about 5 or 6 years of being a really good receiver left. On the defense, Deion Jones and Keanu Neal, when they stay healthy, they can be two very good players. They both were Pro Bowlers in their second years, but Keanu Neal's been hurt for the last two, and Deion Jones has been in and out for the past couple seasons as well. They just added two corners who were recently drafted in the first round. I think either in the last two drafts or they were both drafted pretty early. Isaiah Oliver and AJ Terrell, both good young corners. They have a good D-line up front with Grady Jarrett, who definitely holds it down and who's establishing himself as one of the league's best. And they're just fitting pieces around there. They just signed Dante Fowler. This is a team that I wouldn't count out, who's been in the playoffs and knows what it's like to play deep in the playoffs. They just need to get really hot, not get injured, and then once they play together all as one team and play a whole season like they played the second half of last season, I think the Falcons are a team that if they somehow finessed a playoff spot with the momentum that they had, they would have won at least a game in the playoffs last year. So that's where I think the Falcons are. I think they're an elite level team that's probably going to win early on. The team that's next that I think is going to win, that's got the middle of the 2020s, is the Atlanta Braves. If you're a baseball fan and you're aware of what the Braves are building down in Atlanta, you'd be scared if you're not an Atlanta fan. Not to mention that a couple of years ago, even last year, the Braves were a playoff team and they still had a top 5 farm system in baseball, which is still very dangerous, meaning they had a lot of top level talent and most of them were very young themselves. And they still have elite level prospects coming in through. So the playoffs, they were basically saying, putting this into the simplest terms, they were a playoff team and they didn't have all of their pieces yet, which means that once everyone's there and it's clicking and they can afford everyone, it's basically over. So even just with the pitching staff, Mike Soroka at 22 is already establishing himself as one of the most complete young pitchers. Doesn't throw a lot of strikeouts, but he limits a lot of runs, which most definitely matters, especially if you're a pitcher. He lets the least amount of players cross the plate out of all players that are his age or that are really kind of close to his age. So that's where Mike Soroka stands out. They have a young prospect, Ian Anderson, coming up in either a year or two, and he's considered one of the best young pitchers in the minor leagues, and he might be a future ace alongside Mike Soroka. They have Max Fried, who's shown to be really good at his young age. Mike Foltynewicz, who's really been up and down as a veteran. They have pieces they can really fill in there. Even in relievers, they have Will Smith, they just got from the Giants, the closer from the Giants. They've got Sean Newcomb, who almost threw a no-hitter against the LA Dodgers. They have Tuki Toussaint, another young prospect, and they have more people. They have more prospects that we're really unaware of that they can use to patch and fill in, or they can use a lot of their farm system and trade and get an elite level player. They have William Contreras, who is the younger brother of Wilson Contreras of the Chicago Cubs, as their catcher, who's more than likely going to step up and play that role for the 2020s. And he's still a very, very young prospect to be where he is, which means he's got to be which means he's very, very good for his age. I would count on him to be at least a very competent defensive catcher once he gets to the league. First baseman, we're gonna have Freddie Freeman because he's only 30 years old, and because he's playing first baseman and the National League may be adopting the designated hitter, Freddie Freeman might end up being able to extend his career in Atlanta. So by the time Atlanta really becomes a dynasty, Freddie Freeman will most definitely still be a contributing player. He will definitely be a net positive, especially on the offensive side for the Atlanta Braves. Second baseman, you have Ozzie Albies, who's incredibly young, who has a very possible Hall of Fame career ahead of him, with many All-Stars, Gold Gloves, Silver Sluggers along the way. Great young player to watch. At shortstop, Dansby Swanson, who's very, very good. Not really the top of the team, but considering how good this young team is, he'd be a really, really good player on. He'd be a top 4 or 5 player on half of the teams in the National League, but on the Braves, he's not. He's getting a lot better. He's a really, really competent defensive shortstop, but he's probably never going to win the Gold Glove. But he does enough where it matters, and the city of Atlanta loves him. Third base, Braves don't know if they're going to stick with Austin Riley, who had one of the best starts in all of baseball last year, and then I guess he got a little fatigued. We'll see how he comes back this year. And if not, I've heard the Braves have the pieces to sign a player like Chris Bryant to kind of run through the 2020s with. In the outfield, they have Acuna, who is already cementing himself as one of the league's best players at 21 years old. You can make an argument that he's a top 5 player in the National League right now, including pitchers, including Yelly, Belly. I'd say he's a top 5 player in baseball right now at his young age. And they have 2 young prospects, one of which considered the best defensive prospect in baseball. So they're going to put him at center field. They're saying he looks like Andrew Jones. And then you have Drew Waters, who's also from Georgia, from the city of Atlanta, and he's gonna, from what I've heard, he's looking to be a really, really good prospect, and he's gonna fit on this team. So just reading this roster top to bottom, the Atlanta Braves are looking like a really, really competent young team. And by the time we get to the mid 2020s, Acuna's in his prime, and a lot of these young prospects have they have cemented their spot in this Braves organization. Then I think this Braves organization will go back to the way it was in its glory days in the 90s. Hopefully they can pull off more than one championship win this time, but that's how this young Braves core is looking. The Braves are they're the team I'm most optimistic about, as in there's no way that this team is going to fail or blow up, especially with the new GM. He's kind of really running it. He's doing a really, really good job of putting the team together. And if you're a baseball fan, if you like seeing how some of these teams develop, I think that you either really, really love or you really, really hate the Atlanta Braves, because that's what they've been doing. And then I think the team that's going to run the end of it is the Atlanta Hawks. Travis Schlenk, since he's been GM, has hit a home run on his last 5 first-round picks. Of course, when he first got there, he signed John Collins when the Hawks were basically at their worst. Now, John Collins has really grown into being the go-to finisher on the Atlanta Hawks, while Trae Young is the lead playmaker. He knows that you can always find John Collins on the other end to kind of really finish the possession. He can rebound. He can dribble. He's incredibly smart. He knows how to fly for alley-oops. He knows how to work with Trae Young incredibly well. He brings out Trae Young's strengths. He spaces the floor offensively because he can consistently shoot a 3-point shot. There's a stat going around that people are aware of, that John Collins is one of the youngest players to average what he averages at the shooting percentages he shoots at, even from 3. So that's kind of what makes John Collins special. He's a nice centerpiece, and he's the oldest of the young core. The next year, the Hawks would go and draft trade Luka Doncic for Trae Young, and then the pick that would end up being Cam Reddish the next year. And they also got Kevin Huerter in the same draft. So Trae Young eventually ended up being the runner-up to the Rookie of the Year, Luka Doncic, in his first year. And Trae Young is already the centerpiece of this Atlanta Hawks franchise. He's been top 10 in points and assists in a single season. So people are aware of what Trae Young is most definitely doing, and Trae Young is definitely the face of this team alongside John Collins, who came in a year before him. John Collins definitely took a step down as he let Trae Young take hold of this team. Kevin Huerter starting to be a really, really amazing wing who's really filling into his role, who can catch and shoot and add offense and most definitely space the floor. The next year, the Hawks were able to draft DeAndre Hunter and Cam Reddish and Bruno Fernando. So that's what the Hawks have been doing. I think Cam Reddish fits in there very well. I think he was one of the players that I predicted that he wouldn't start off incredibly well. It would take him a second to get used to the pace of the NBA and start playing the same player across from him more than one time, which I think is something that he kind of dealt with at Duke, and also some with his confidence. But I like that he's placed in this position with this young core, and they can definitely bring out the best in Cam Reddish, especially with how Trae Young and John Collins and Kevin Huerter's skills space them out offensively, and how Cam Reddish is one of the league's. He's going to grow into one of the league's best defenders eventually, just one of the best perimeter defenders that the NBA has. And then you can say the same with DeAndre Hunter, who was the ACC Defensive Player of the Year, who the Hawks also got. They can put into their death lineup, basically. Like I said, he basically feels he is where he needs to be. He's able to finish plays that Trae Young sets up for him. He's able to use the advantage of the space floor that the Hawks offense creates, and he's able to get his own baskets. The Hawks also got Bruno Fernando, who comes in whenever he needs to, and he's very, very big, and he can kind of, just step in and play defense and be a rock when you need him to be. And the Hawks also were able to trade for Clint Capella, and now the Hawks have a 25-year-old center who can be the oldest player within this core, who might be traded but probably not, and can work alongside John Collins and space the floor for Trae Young. I think this Hawks team is definitely going to take some time to build up. As many NBA great players hit their prime around their age 27, 28 season, Trae Young's only 21. So a lot of these players are really, really young. I wouldn't see them winning or getting super far in the East this season, but I think in the next coming years, you're going to see how good and young this Hawks team is. And once they start winning games and once John Collins plays a full season for not getting suspended, and Trae Young gets a chance to take a break and not have to carry the team for half the year, and Cam Reddish starts to carry his own weight, and DeAndre Hunter starts to get more incorporated in the offense, and Clint Capella just does what he does and just continues to be a rock and the main rebounder on this team. This Atlanta Hawks team is looking very dangerous when you look at it through that lens. That's where I think the Hawks are going to come in. And overall, I think because of the amazing work that the GMs have done and the moves that they've made to show that they're some of the best GMs in sports. I mean, Dimitrov is behind the Julio Jones trade. He and Dan Quinn have helped draft some of the Falcons' really, really good defensive players that are going to make the Falcons a very formidable team in the near future. On the Braves, Alex Anthopoulos, ever since taking over as the Braves GM after the last GM was in trouble for international recruiting violations, he was still able to bring up a lot of the Braves farm system, and he was able to he was able to set them up with trainers and talent coaches and coaches and scouts to help bring out the best they have to offer for this organization. And these players, it's really showing off. You see a lot of these young players that are making their first All-Star appearances, and Alex Anthopoulos has been able to sign these players for long term. We can get into the contracts themselves at a different time, but the Braves are doing what they need to do to build another dynasty, and Alex Anthopoulos is most definitely on top of that. He's being able to sign the relievers that he did this past season to make the Braves a formidable opponent this year, despite the fact that they're not fully formed yet. And once they are, it'll be over. And then, last but not least, the Atlanta Hawks. Travis Schlenk hitting a home run on every single draft pick. I don't think I've seen a GM draft in a 3-year span like Travis Schlenk has drafted. I think every single pick that he's made in the first round, or at least the out of John Collins, Trae Young, Kevin Herter, Cam Reddish, and DeAndre Hunter. I think they're all home run. I think they're all home run picks. Shows how amazing of a GM he is, and he was able to make the Clint Capella move right before the deadline, and give Trae Young someone he can actually trust in the long run, and that's always good. So that's really why I think Atlanta's going to be dominant. If you get a chance to, say any other city that has really a better chance of winning the trifecta, of course, I'm always open to hear. But once again, I thank you for taking the time to listen to just the rants that I'm going on. I'm from Atlanta, obviously. I lived in LA. I claim the Atlanta teams. So I'm not saying this to be incredibly biased. I think that as an Atlanta fan, it's good to make other people aware of the situation that I'm watching, so that they can watch this too. All the Atlanta teams are really, really, really fun to watch. If you get a chance to do it. And thanks again for taking the time to listen to this. I really appreciate it. And with that, I'm going to sign off by saying peace.